you all are in for a treat. I do an audio podcast, also called Jumpstart Your Joy. And for the last year, I've been looking at the topic of intentional comfort, how we can find more comfort in our lives, how comfort and joy tie together. And we are coming to the end of season 7. And so I'm counting down the hits here. Welcome to my video and my channel here on YouTube. I could not be more excited to be sharing these top 10 episodes with you for a season that's been deeply meaningful to me. It's been so fun to look at the theme of intentional comfort because, of course, that's all about how we find more time to care for ourselves, more time to delight in things, and more time just to spend in comfort and ease. The last 2.5 years have been a little bit much for a lot of us. And I feel like, it's time to intentionally make time for things that feel easier for each of us. So first up is a really delightful conversation that I had with author Emma Loewe. And here's her book. It's called Return to Nature, The New Science of How Natural Landscapes Restore Us. Emma talks about, just like the title says, how there are different kinds of landscapes and how humans kind of resonate with them and how they bring us more joy and comfort. If you think about it, you probably do have a favorite place to visit. Maybe it's the ocean or it's the hills or it's a river, but your heart is drawn to it. And let's listen to her talk about some of the science that comes about in why we are so drawn to these different kinds of landscapes.
One of the main sort of theories as to why getting out in nature is so restorative for us mentally has to do with this idea that nature presents a certain set of factors that can just be very cognitively restorative. And one of them is the sense of being away. So stepping outside of your everyday routine and feeling like you're in a new place that you can sort of take in, which is interesting. And they've done research to sort of correlate living close to the coast with decreased rates of depression. They've done this research in the UK. The forest is super fascinating. This is a topic of a lot of research and coming out of Japan specifically. And a lot of it is actually spearheaded by MDs, medical doctors. So there's a fair amount of research to actually show the physiological effects of forests versus, the cognitive. So one of the most fascinating, I thought, was, researchers in Japan found that after taking a 3-day excursion into a forest environment, people returned with higher, 50% more activity in their NK cells, which is a immune white blood cell that is a first line of defense against, foreign intruders. So I was really, amazed that it could have that sort of effect on people. And it also, after a follow-up study, 30 days later, they still had higher NK levels than when they had first set out, which I thought was fascinating.
If you want to buy her book, of course, there'll be a card right above. The next one was a solo cast, which is what I call the shows that I do all on my own without a guest. And the title of this episode was 5 Easy Mindfulness Tips to Help You Every Day. The first step is to notice your emotions. We often go through our days kind of not aware of even what our thoughts are doing and what we are feeling about something. And so the first step in mindfulness is noticing your emotions. And the next step that is really helpful is taking a breath. It might seem really simple, and that's why it's so portable and it's something that you can do every day. But if you notice that you're feeling kind of stressed and those shoulders are getting up here, breathe in, breathe out, and smile, which is what the what Master Thich Nhat Hanh recommends, as we just heard from Emma Loewe. Important to spend some time in nature. That is a mindful choice that you can make every day, maybe by going on a walk or doing something else. The fourth one that I talk about is meditating or using a guided meditation. You can find some of those on this channel as well. I'll link to one here. And the fifth is spending time in a labyrinth. I'm a certified labyrinth facilitator, and I'm going to talk more about this here on the channel. But a labyrinth is a walking meditation that you can do that can really help you sort through your thoughts. So that is 5 easy mindfulness tips to help you every day. The next one that I want to talk about is a personal friend of mine and a brand new author, and that is Heather Hall. And she wrote this amazing book, Step Up and Stand Out, 30 Tips for Aspiring Introverted Leaders. Now, You might not think that someone that has a YouTube show and has been doing audio podcasting for a really long time is an introvert, but I am. I get my energy from quiet, from solitude, from being inside, and sometimes being an extrovert or being in extroverted spaces seems like it comes naturally for me, but it is not always easy. And I really loved Heather's book. I feel like I needed this book to better understand how I could stand out in a corporate setting as an introvert, because some of it is so deeply uncomfortable to put yourself out there or to put your ideas out there, especially if you don't feel like you're really valued in that culture.
The introvert is the person who wants that quiet time, needs to have that peace to come back to center, and their thoughts are really well figured out before they ever give voice to them. The subtitle I thought about using was "Without Straying Too Far from Your Comfort Zone," because that's part of the trick, right? You've got to
Yes.
practice little steps, little steps, little steps, and then your comfort zone gets a little bit bigger and bigger. And really for me, the book came out of the lessons that I learned in my years through corporate, struggling to meet expectations and literally burning myself out, burning that candle at both ends, not just
Yeah.
for pressure from the work environment, but also it was my escape from my personal environment. So spending all that time and all that energy and learning the hard way how to kind of step back and manage it, that pressure to be bold and really speak about things as if they're larger than life, which extroverts do so easily, but introverts tend to keep these things private and quiet. I think when you hit a conversation topic where an introvert is passionate about something, they come to life. They get bubbly. But
Mm.
especially that pressure to talk in a setting or prove yourself in a corporate setting, that can be really challenging.
Thank you so much for being on, Heather, and for writing this amazing book. I will link up to it. The next one in my list, was a third-time returnee, and you may know him from the band Cowboy Mouth. Yes, that's right. It's the lead singer, Fred LeBlanc. I just love Fred's energy because he is he's so much fun, and I love that he is such a deep thinker. Every time that I've had him come on, he talks about spirituality and mindfulness and how to get into the zone. And so, one of the favorite things that we talked about was how during the pandemic, when he wasn't able to play with his band in live settings, which is one of the things he loves most, he was really moved at how some people were reaching out to him to share what his work had meant to them.
Stopped playing music for like a year. Actually, let's see. It's actually 14 months. And
Mm.
I hadn't not played music professionally that long since 1981.
Wow.
And it was something. It was, I mean, everybody suffered. Everybody remembers what it was like. It wasn't that long ago. It was just like 2 weeks ago. Gave me a lot of time to reflect. Gave me some time to rest. And I told everybody I needed about a month's worth of sleep for about 20 years. So finally got it.
Yeah.
I got married literally the week before lockdown. So, me and my wife, we did what honeymooners do for a long time, so, which was fine. And I was very fortunate in that people would send me emails or something like that saying what this song or that show had meant to them and things like that. And just in the constant progress of moving forward, you never really get a chance to look back. And the way people let me know how much the band and songs and things like that had done for them or enabled them to bring joy to their lives was really eye-opening, because it's something I never really considered. Something
Yeah.
that was it was something that was presented to me, and maybe the last 25 years haven't been a waste of time after all.
Thanks, Fred. The thing that is interesting to me about this is I think we often it ties into this mindfulness and this comfort. We often are moving so fast that we don't really take the time to look back and take stock on the things that have happened in our lives. So I thought this was a beautiful reminder that Fred was getting from his fans about the impact that he had made on their lives. It's also really important to not get too fixated on how the right now feels when things are hard. And that's another piece of the comfort, is how can you find those things that feel easier and that remind you there are good things still, even when things are really hard. That ties into the next episode that you guys loved. And I have to give a huge shout out to Jenn Oglesbee. Jenn is a life coach, and we just get along so well. Much of her message is also about joy and how you can embrace joy. And I wanted to have Jenn on for a couple of reasons. The first is that the whole idea of intentional comfort came about when the summer before, so that would be the summer of 21, we had a 3-part series on Instagram Live called What the Hell Happened? And we were looking back over the past year and trying to kind of parse out what in the world happened over the pandemic from a mental health perspective. And we arrived at this idea of intentional comfort being so important as we moved forward. And so thank you to Jenn for helping kind of cultivate this idea. And thank you for her to saying yes to coming back once the whole season was underway. Jenn very sadly lost her sister to brain cancer in December of 21. And she joined me to talk about how she still finds joy and comfort even in the times of deep, deep sorrow and grief.
I've been living the uncertainty that we've all been living with the pandemic. So, and that uncertainty has felt, that uncertainty is what pushed me to do things like quit my job and start a business. Cause I was just like, well, this all looks like a big mess. Now seems like a good time, as any to do these things. Right. So it kind of, there's, that level of uncertainty kind of pushed me closer to the things that were calling to me or that felt most important to me. My family definitely became one of those families that just got so squeezed by the pandemic and 2 full-time jobs and having kids at home that something had to give. And, I know a lot of people were in that position, but my job was like stressing me out so much. It was actually making me sick. And so it became pretty clear like what needed to go. But the other layer of uncertainty that I have been living with for the last couple of years relates to my sister. So she's my only sibling, and she was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2016. And then it's a long story, all the things that she went through during that time, but ended up cancer-free until the summer of 2020. And then we found out that her cancer had come back. And she had a very rare form of cancer with a very unclear prognosis. And so at that time, it was like, you could have a year or 2, or you could have decades. That was really all we knew. And so we were very much living in this time of one MRI to the next and seeing what we see. And so that was definitely a whole nother layer of uncertainty, on top of not being able to see her as much as I wanted to because of COVID and travel. And the last thing I wanted to do was, bring her an illness. And then things progressed pretty quickly in the summer of 2021 and into the fall. And she passed away in December. And so for me, everyone's relationship with their siblings is different. I say I have like 4 loves of my life: my husband, my 2 kids, and my sister. My sister is just my insides. And for me, that was an unthinkable loss. And, anyone who's lost someone can tell you that knowing that it's coming doesn't make it any more unthinkable or any less unthinkable. And so there was a lot of uncertainty about how to support her from 3 states away. There was a lot of uncertainty about where things were headed. There was a lot of uncertainty of poor communication with her doctors, mixed information, crossed wires. Like nobody could tell us what the hell was going on. And like, I knew that she was dying and I could not get a doctor to just say that to me. And so there was a lot of questioning myself. Like, this is what I see to be certain. But the quote unquote experts won't just say that to me. So there was sitting with that too. And then of course, like losing her, this is someone that I thought was going to be in my life for, the next 50 years. I thought we were going to be together till the end. And, we would retire and we'd like live next door to each other. And then our husbands would die and then we'd move in together. And then we'd like be a bedroom away from each other. And then we would magically die like on the same day. This was how it needed to go in my head in order for any of this to be okay. And that's all not to be. And so for me, it's really been a process of, just intense surrender, really, just knowing that there are things that there is no certainty. And it just opens up the whole box of like, all of life is uncertain. And, you know, I'm in this phase now where it's like all these questions about mortality. And, you know, I just have a pile of books on my nightstand about death, dying, and grief. I'm a really good time right now. But yeah, I had to just sit with this place of not just loss, but like I felt the floor come out from under me, and all the things that brought me comfort and joy did not anymore. It was like it all went dormant and all went dark. And as someone who has hitched her wagon on joy, not only personally, but professionally, that was very disconcerting for sure. And I couldn't really do anything except just let it be.
Jenn, thank you so much for sharing your journey. I know that the conversation wasn't easy, and yet I'm so honored that you shared it with us here, and that you're kind of living your life in a way that is showing an example of what grief can look like and how people can hold space for both grief and joy when they're going through a really hard time. Thank you, Jenn. Next up was one of the really early episodes of season 7, and it was with someone who had been on before. Her name is Stasia Savasuk, and you might know her from Stasia's Style School, or she also has a TED Talk talking about how she dresses for inside out congruency. And what that means is that you're choosing clothes that allow you to feel the way you want to feel, and how you can feel really good about yourself. I loved having Stasia on because she talked in January about how you can wear your word for the year. So many of us pick these words of the year, you know, maybe it's hope or dream or whatever. And one of the things that she's bringing about is this idea of how you can also dress to feel that way too.
What usually happens is that people pick a word of the year, because this is wicked funny to me. And then in January 27th, I'm like, what's your word? And they're like, I don't remember. By the end of January, people have already forgotten their word. So what the hell? Why pick a word? You might as well pick a resolution and buy into that scam too, right? So for me, what I do, usually at the end of a year, at the start of the year, like that transition time, I wear my word. I figure out what color my word is. What color is my word? What does it feel like? What's the texture? What's the silhouette? What are the combinations that I'm going to put together? What kind of earrings do I want to wear that are going to connect me to that feeling? So I intensively go into it to be like, I want to know what it looks like, what it feels like, because I want to connect it every day so I don't forget what it is. Because what I always say is my word is my work, right? Yeah. It's not just this fantastical little thing that I do. This is the thing that it's going to get dirt under my fingernails all year long, right? And so I do this. I just was in Joshua Tree. I live in Vermont. I flew out to Joshua Tree because I was like, that's what my next word is. It lives in Joshua Tree. And so I went out, got a photographer. We went out to New York, to Joshua Tree, and I did a photo shoot there. And I awkwardly moved my body. Like I felt like I was Elaine dancing in the Seinfeld. Do you remember with the thumbs?
Yes.
That was
my
me.
goodness.
Like, I need to know what my word feels like. And I want to capture it in a photograph, like in a series of photographs, because I want to plaster it. I want it on my phone. I want it on my screensaver because I got to know what it feels like inside my body. How do I move my body to feel my word? Right? Yeah. So I just did a photo shoot. I know like my word for 2022 is light pink, burnt orange, white, and mustard yellow. Like those are my colors right now. So then when I go shopping, I just go pink, mustard, orange, white. That's what I shop for. I bring in 2 or 3 new things, add them to my small closet that I have already. And all of a sudden, my entire closet now matches my word. I didn't buy a new wardrobe. That's wasteful. I'm not going to do that, right? But if I buy a pink scarf, I can wear that with everything and I have an automatic connection to my scarf. So that's my scarf that's representative of my word. So every time I grab it, I'm grabbing my word. I'm wrapping it around me. When I put on that jacket, I'm putting that jacket around my shoulders. I'm putting my word around my shoulders so that I wear it and I carry it with me the whole year because I intend to live my life fully and I'm going to step into the growth opportunities when they arise. But I have to remember And so I make it so I don't forget, right? So that's what WOW is all about, is really like embodying your word and keeping it super close so that you can stay committed to it for the whole year. And then you just like can't even believe what happens when you do that. Your life changes.
Thank you so much for joining me, Stasia. I highly recommend Stasia Style School. It definitely changed my relationship with clothing and how I see myself. If you haven't signed up with her yet, I highly encourage you to do that. The next two that we're going to be talking about are both solo casts. And it's always so fascinating to me, especially because, I think as podcasters, we'll step into that role for just a second. We tend to think that interviews are the ones that always outpace other things because, we have a guest sharing it, etc. And one of the things that I tell people when I mentor them to start their own podcast is just you wait. Lots of times your audience is really interested to learn what you have to say about a topic. And I think that comes true here because we're hitting right here at about 7 and 8 most downloaded. And so the first one was me talking about 10 things that will inspire more passion and joy in your work and life. We're hearing more and more about people who are quietly quitting. And I think that comes from, one of the base points might be that so many of us are feeling discouraged and downtrodden. And as Eileen Smith, actually season 6, talked about, we've been in a trauma vortex for a couple of years at this point, and I think we're burnt out, right? And so as I look at that, I wanted to share some ways that you all could find more passion and more joy in your work and life. I did lead off with 2 key ideas that you might want to try before you even jump into the top 10. Let's talk about them for just a second, and then I'll link up to the full episode and show notes if you want to learn about the other 10. The first topic that I really found helpful when I did it earlier in this year was revisiting my values. Now, a lot of us have gone through these practices. Maybe it's at a work, fun day or an all hands meeting, but so many of us have tried to define our values. And I encourage you to go check out the exercise that's online, and it's by Brene Brown. And I'll link to that as well down below if you want to try it. I've, of course, done a values exercise in the past. And of course, it feels like kind of you're going through the motions. Maybe you are just kind of trying to get it done. But I think if you spend some time and actually go through those things that really resonate with you and that you really want to put front and center for your life, it can make a huge difference and it can reinvigorate you about your work. I decided when I did this values exercise most recently that my 3 key values, and these play both in my personal life and in my business, are magic, which you might be surprised it's not joy, but I'm going to use a different word for that. I feel like joy ties into magic really tightly, and it is that delight factor that's beyond feeling the joy, but like experiencing the joy. So I picked magic for that. Integrity is my second one, which means I'm doing and saying things that match. I'm not a different person here on YouTube than I am in my real life. And then expertise. As someone, you're getting to know me here on YouTube, this is me stepping into owning that I've been a podcaster for 8 years. Like there's a level of expertise when you get to do things. And sometimes it can be super vulnerable to step into those spaces. So that's why I assigned that word for myself. I am an expert. I own my own business doing this. So it's an encouragement for me to step into it and own those places where I'm an expert and talk about it in those kinds of ways. So if you want to figure out your own top 3 values, again, you can find that link below. And then the other one that I think is really helpful, and you can do this whether you are working, at a company or you own your own business, it's take a look at the pros and cons of what you have liked and don't like about past or current jobs or past or current business. I think if you list those out side by side and get really honest with yourself about what you love, because there's going to be something you like. Maybe it's the flexibility. Maybe it's that you can work from home sometimes. Maybe it's that nobody's looking over your shoulder about specific tasks. There's going to be something, even in difficult jobs, that you probably have enjoyed. If you can't find it in this current one, think about past jobs that you've really enjoyed and what were the benefits to you for that job, because I think you know what kinds of things you love. And then also look at the cons. There's going to be good and bad in every job. Look at those. And then if you are looking to make a change, maybe you just you know what you're looking for in that next job description. It has this, but not that. So that is the 2 ways to define your passion. And you can find the other 10 ways to bring more passion and joy into your life below. And the reason why this is important for comfort is I think many of us are looking for work that is deeply meaningful. And maybe that's what this big quiet quitting shift is all about, is that we want to feel like we're doing something that matters. And I think if you don't know what the target is for what you are looking for in this life and what matters most to you, it's going to be hard to hit that when you go to look for something new. Or maybe you can refactor the job that you currently have to play to some of the things that align with your values and align with what you love. And there's comfort in that. That's intentionally making a path. That's lifestyle design. That's you making a mindful, intentional choice to go towards something that plays to your strengths, and that probably feels better than all of the bad things or the things that don't align with your values. So that's why that one fits with intentional comfort. The next one that hit the charts is my episode on finding your heart's second home. Oh, this one aligns so closely with intentional comfort. The idea of your heart's second home is that there are places that just make your heart sing when you visit them. And again, this one ties back into that Emma Loewe interview. Many of them might be places of beauty and places that you find in nature. But I think many of us have that sense of there is a place that my heart just feels at home. And so in this episode, I talk about how you can find and define them, and then the importance of visiting those places, whether you can do it physically, maybe now that things are opening up a little bit more, you can, or you know what? You can also just do it as a mental little coffee break, if you will, where you visit that place in your mind instead of physically visiting it. That was number 8. The next one we're going to talk about is William J. Peters, and he wrote the book At Heaven's Door. He is also the founder of the Shared Crossing Project, which is out of Santa Barbara, California. And oh my goodness, we talked about shared death experiences and near-death experiences. Now you might wonder, like, what does this have to do with intentional comfort, Jenkins? Which is what I call myself in my head. And it has to do with comfort, because when we start to talk about what is a shared death experience, it is when someone who is living in some way experiences or participates or has a visitation from someone who is passing away. And it's usually a very benevolent and loving and caring event where maybe you feel that they've come to visit you. Maybe you're there and you even see some visions in the room. But the reason this ties into intentional comfort is what he has found in his research, that is also in his book, is that when people have a shared death experience, they are more likely to have a very favorable or less frightening outlook towards their own death, which, let's face it, that's one of the only things that we can all count on, is that we will die someday. And so I think becoming comfortable with our own humanity and the inevitability of our own death is important. And I think having had a shared death experience myself with my grandmother when I was 10, it has given me a greater sense of calm and knowing as I go through life.
The shared death experience is defined as a loved one or caregiver or even a bystander is either at the bedside or remote at the time of someone who is dying, and they report that they shared in the crossing into a benevolent afterlife. The most important thing about a shared death experience is that we're getting a glimpse, as loved ones, caregivers, or bystanders, we're getting a glimpse into this journey. That's the dominant motif, the journey from this human life to what lies beyond. And the themes in terms of characteristics or qualities is highly energetic. Like there's something about it that pulls you into a different experience of sensations within yourself. The other piece of this would be that there's good sublime feelings. So feelings of love or euphoria, joy would work too. If you look at the primary characteristic of the shared death experience from our research, 51% of our interviewed experiencers report seeing the dying in some form. 16% report seeing an elevated being of some type that's there essentially to greet the dying, the transitioning individual. 13% will report seeing other deceased relatives or friends. 25% will report seeing a brilliant light. Now, when we bring up light, your viewers may be thinking, oh, this sounds a lot like the NDE, the near-death experience. And indeed it is. Those of us who study this, Raymond Moody in particular, we've had many conversations about these experiences. And we agree that the near-death experience and the shared death experience are similar. 2/3, about 64% of all of our interviewees will report a remote shared death experience, not a bedside. Now, this changes everything because you asked a question about, well, was this a vision or a visitation? Well, no, a post-death dream or a post-death vision or visitation, which we also track in our research, is very different because they're coming in, and in that type of visitation, the person, the deceased that appears, usually appears very stable. They're just there, and they're coming to you, and they're coming with a specific message. And then when it's delivered, they disappear. Now, in a remote or even bedside, but in a remote SDE, what you'll notice is that you get a sense that they're coming to visit you to tell you, thank you, I love you, goodbye. And then you actually will get a sense that they're departing. It's like this, your deceased loved one comes in, drops right in on you, stops for a second, gives you a sacred communication.
And the really cool thing about this one is there are 3 videos actually here on YouTube that you can watch if you want a little bit more of this conversation with William J. Peters. It's no surprise that this book also became a bestseller on Amazon. So huge congratulations to William J. Peters, and thank you so much for joining me. Now, this last one, the number 1 most downloaded and most loved episode of season 7 was with Scott Leftwich. And we talked about all things 80s, and this was such a fun conversation to have. And so Scott owns the largest privately owned vintage arcade east of the Mississippi. And he has, I think, over 200 different arcade games there it's a part of his home. He also owns an Airbnb that's all 80s themed, and he's in a band. And it was so much fun to talk to him. I first saw him interviewed by Adam the Woo, which is here on YouTube. It was a really fun conversation to see Adam go in and experience this really cool arcade. And I knew I wanted to talk to Scott because he's really leaning into this passion project of his. You know, he has another day job. And so he is doing this other work on the side. And I felt like it tied in with intentional comfort because he gets to see the absolute and utter joy that people experience when they go in and experience an arcade. The sights, the sounds, and even the smells. Do you remember how an arcade smells? He's doing that, and it's a mindful choice.
Sometimes I will walk down into my basement and just take a deep breath because I can smell that smell. They have this smell about them, and it's a good smell. I've been collecting and restoring arcade games for 26 years. And from 1996 to 2006, nobody wanted this stuff. So I amassed a lot of things then, and I put them in storage and kind of slowly myself to work on them. And I have a couple of friends that help out when they can. It just became a fascination with bringing these games back to life that had been dead for many years. But, now it's become a huge nostalgic thing. And, those games inspired a generation of people. And now those people want to share that with their kids. And teenagers love it. We have lots of teenage regulars that come here. They cannot get enough. It's just a cycle of joy. I'm still learning things constantly, always learning, because there's so many manufacturers, and now I have 9 games here in which there are less than 10 of known to exist in the world. And so, with stuff like that, sometimes you just have to feel your way through it. It's fun, and it's always worth it. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know about, and some of it can be rough on me physically and maybe mentally too, but it's always worth it when, say a 50-year-old man walks through the door and he's 12, boom, just like that. He looks around and you can see that happen in their eyes. That smile comes upon their face and they're just in heaven. They're seeing and hearing things they've not seen and heard in 35 years-ish. And we've even had instances where people have come in the door and started crying because it's attached to a good memory.
I will link up to the full interview with Scott. It's in the audio versions of the podcast here. And I just want to thank him for being on the show. So that is the top 10 most downloaded episodes here on season 7. Thank you all for tuning in each week and for listening and for delighting in these conversations with me. And I'm really excited about season 8, where I'm going to be going back to just old-fashioned joy. What do people take a joy in? What do they delight in? And of course, we'll talk about the inspiration, intention, action that you can take to also bring that kind of joy into your own life. If you want to get a link to all of these past episodes and the books that I've talked about, and you want to listen in or watch some of the conversations that I've mentioned here of these top 10, you can find a link down in the notes. Or if you want to find out more about me or Jumpstart Your Joy, just head on over to the website, jumpstartyourjoy.com, and that's where you will find 327 past episodes. And you can sign up for my newsletter there or below, or you can buy my book there or below. Thank you guys so much for this amazing run of season 7. Next week on the show, I'm really excited to be doing more of my reflections about some of the impact that talking about intentional comfort had on me for the past year. I hope you'll come on back next week for that episode. And until then, I hope that your days are filled with so much joy.